This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Xcast. The truth is in here. I'm your host Tony Black, and once again I'm joined for a very special interview after a brief appearance at the beginning of this year with none other than one of the major stars of the X-Files himself, Mr. William B. Davis. It's great to have you back on, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's really nice to speak to you again. When I spoke to you at the start of the year, it was obviously the peak season for season 11 of the X-Files. You know, it had just begun. I think it was just after the premiere episode had aired.
Right.
And I remember we had a brief conversation about where you put some hints out there about what would happen in the season finale and things like that. But obviously at that point we didn't know what was going to happen, and now we're towards the end of the year and we all know the fate of the cigarette smoking man and his master plan and everything like that. So thinking about it 10 months after our last conversation, how do you feel about the last season of the X-Files and your role in it?
Well, it was great fun to do. Well, I say that with a little bit of a caveat, because we spent a number of very long, cold nights filming it. But apart from that, I really liked, except for, of course, what happened at the very end when of course, you all think I was shot and you think I fell in the water, but I've been trying to explain to Chris Carter that actually wasn't me. That was a morphed image of me. So it really, I think, should the X-Files ever continue, I think I might have survived my fourth death.
I don't think anyone is expecting anything less, really, at this point. I think everyone would be disappointed if you didn't rise out of that water somehow. But how do you feel about then the fan feedback after obviously, you know, the reveals about the Smoking Man and what he was planning and his viral master plan and everything with the character of William and everything? How do you feel the fan reaction has been, and how does it sit with you now with a little bit of distance?
Well, it's been mixed and a little unclear. I mean, obviously people were upset at the idea that possibly I took sexual advantage of Scully way back when, and so that was a tricky point, and some people were very upset to find out that William was actually not Mulder's child. But on the other hand, as a dramatic device, I thought it was quite exciting. Of course, we had to explain that it was not a sexual activity that happened to get her pregnant, but it was somehow done scientifically, and we never really explained how it was done. But I don't know who knows what the Smoking Man's sex life was like. We still don't know what he was doing with Monica Reyes. And,
this is true.
Monica... I have my backstory, and Annabeth has hers, and they're not the same. But generally, I think people really like the episodes and like the series, and so that's all been very positive and very exciting. We just had this big X-File convention in Orlando, and the fans were very enthusiastic.
Yeah, the Spooky Empire. A lot of our fans now, listeners now, patrons have been at Spooky Empire. You probably met a fair few of them actually who listen to this podcast, and they seem to have they seem to have had a great time. Do you feel that it's still really, the fandom's still really active and they're really keen on the show, even though it could be over, you know?
Yeah, it certainly seemed like it. At that event, I mean that certainly pulled all the fans from wherever, because we were all there, and David and Gillian were there, and so it was a very much an X-File kind of reunion or celebration. But there was a terrific excitement. There was a terrific enthusiasm. So it was of fun and very rewarding.
Yeah, it really seemed that way. It was nice. It got everyone together again. But I'm gonna leap in and take some questions because from fans, because obviously when we
sure.
said you were going to come on, there was quite a few people had some interesting questions. So this is going to cover a few different areas. Just back on the topic of the season 11 revelations, Masiek asks, what was your first thought when you found out the Smoky Man was going to tell Skinner that he might be William's father?
Well, I didn't even think I was a might be. The Smoky Man has he gets around. I mean, it was quite a surprise originally to find out that I'd been getting it on with Mulder's mother. But no, it was a big surprise to me. But I knew it would be a lot of fun to play. And again, in these days of fake news, you never really know who's telling the truth. But I knew it would be a great thing to land on Skinner. So I was looking forward to doing that.
Poor Skinner.
Yeah.
We hope if I think a lot of us hope that if season 12 happens, that he'll find a way out of that car somehow from under that car. Fingers crossed.
I don't want to tell tales out of school, but I have reason to believe that yes, he probably survived that.
Oh, that's going to be music to quite a few people's ears.
I shouldn't have said that, should I?
Spoilers.
But for me, on the other hand, Chris was talking to Annabeth and to me after we shot that particular episode, saying, no one ever really dies on the X-Files. There's flashbacks and blah, blah, blah. Sure, yeah, tell that to Jerry Harding, who got one episode after he was killed. But then when I explained to Chris that really it wasn't me that got killed, that was really a morphed image that I had worked through the boy. He went, oh yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, it was William, or it was a shapeshifter. Who knows? It could be anything. Speaking of deaths, actually, Adam asks, what is your favourite of the Smoking Man's deaths? If well, as you've already said, we're sure he'll be back if there's another season. But would you be, if this was it, would you be happy with this being the way the Smoking Man went out?
That's a good question. I mean, I did survive a cruise missile somehow. So, I think, the death that was supposed to be the end of the series at the end of season 9 was certainly pretty colorful. But between that death and, I'm prejudiced, you see, because I don't really want the Smoking Man to die. So I can't really say one death was better than another. One death that I survived is better than another death that I survived. I don't see it quite as, the fans keep thinking I'm the villain and something bad should happen to me, but I think I'm the good guy. And so,
well, all the great villains think they're the hero of the story, don't they? So
exactly.
That's
right.
it. Thinking of the sort of in between the truth when you got hit by the missile and my struggle when you came back, Dan asks, did Chris Carter tell you the reason that the Smoking Man is still alive? Carter had hinted that it was by design, in inverted commas, that the Smoking Man is healing up quickly between episodes of the new seasons. So I think he's curious as to how I mean, if he gave you any insight into how it was possible.
No, he gave me none. In the magic of the X-Files, just there I was in a hospital covered in burns, and all I knew was that it took about 4 hours to put the makeup on. But somehow I was there. But how I got there, I don't know if even anything much was said about how I even arrived at that hospital. So no, he didn't explain anything to me about how I might have done that. He didn't explain very much. Generally, we got the scripts and we figured them out. Oh, okay, well this must be what happened, or we worked out whatever our backstory could be, because it doesn't have to be the same as his, so long as it makes the scene work.
Yeah.
So.
That's kind of the joy of the show anyway, isn't it, really, I think, for fans, in that we don't really know all the details, and it wouldn't be the same show, I think, if we did. So
yeah, no, exactly. No, exactly.
again, another question about if anything was discussed with Chris Carter, but Justin asks, do you think that the Smoking Man's depopulation plan was his agenda all along, so through the entire run of the X-Files? Or do you think that the Smoking Man decided to depopulate the planet in My Struggle 4 on his own, after the aliens apparently called off their big invasion, which was going to happen, obviously? Do you think that there was a change, and did Chris Carter ever talk to you about anything like that?
No, and I didn't even see it that way, actually. So that's pretty interesting. Oh, okay. I mean, I assumed that the planet was going to depopulate, and my goal was to save a portion of the population from that climactic event. I didn't see that I was the ultimate cause of that event. It may be that that I would have some effect on. I don't know. I hadn't really thought that I was going to kill the whole world. No, I mean, so do you think the aliens called off their invasion? Do you? Was there?
Well, I think there was a line that one of the characters says in the last episode, in that they had decided not to bother invading because we were destroying the planet quite well ourselves with climate change, and
we're doing it ourselves. No, that's true. No, that's true. And you know, Chris and I do share a common concern in the real world about climate change and what we are in fact doing to our planet, and the idea that one would just, in a way, euthanasia the population, so we don't have to go through all the terrible suffering that we're likely to go through as we destroy the planet, might be an act of mercy on the part of the Smoking Man. But that's perhaps getting a little heavy-handed here. But anyway,
he would probably see it that way, though, wouldn't he, as a character? Almost certainly.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this plays into a question from Donna, in which it's kind of two questions. And she says, you know, there are at times over the show that the Smoking Man's had conversations with Mulder or the other syndicate members of Scully, and he sounds so sincere and truthful, and even though the audience might soon learn it was a lie. And she says, do you feel that there were times when he was really sincere in terms of how he cared about people? So NME, obviously, which you wrote, is a good example where he seems to genuinely have some affection for Scully, even if the result of that's a bit uncertain. But what do you think his best quality is as a human being? Ultimately, our question is, and you know, do you enjoy playing those aspects?
Yeah, because what we kind of went through with NME was first of all the attraction at some level to Scully. That there was certainly some admiration, some attachment, and you know, in that dinner scene where I actually confess that I'm a lonely man, you know, and you know, that I have cancer, and all of those things. So that was quite personal and quite intimate, I thought. And in the end, you know, when I throw that tape in the water, that could have given me or someone the power to destroy the planet, and I destroyed that power. At a certain level, I was prepared only to go so far, I suppose, with my villainy, and at a certain point I would pull back. But I think he was a man in a very complicated situation, and we shot but never showed an episode where we were all young.
Okay.
And we never showed it because, well, this is a pretty silly thing, and we all had wigs. But as I understand it, because they rented the wigs, they couldn't cut them. And because we couldn't cut them, they couldn't make them believable. Okay. And so when they did kind of close-ups, it really just didn't work. But it was fun to do, you know, with Peter Donat as Mulder's father and me. We're young and keen, and we believe what we're doing is going to save the world or do what has to be done. And you know, gradually pressures from the aliens and whatever on the Smoking Man over time, just to kind of push him in a situation where he felt he had to do it this way, and there was really no other way to go, and he he smoked to hollow out all his emotional background and harden himself to the task he was destined to play.
Mm. It's funny you say about those wigs. I think they did show them briefly, because there's an episode, I think, in the 6th season where I think the smoking man lays it all out on the table, all the entire conspiracy. And I think there's a moment with you and Peter Donat where you do see the wigs, but obviously they cut a lot more.
There's one still that got used, and I think there's a couple of moments of it, but we actually shot a whole bunch of stuff that we didn't ever see. No.
That's a shame. I don't think that ever made it onto the special features or anything either, that's a shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting to think about, the character in those with those human aspects. So I'm glad Donna asked that, really. But she also asks on a different note about the smoking aspect, and I think you've discussed this before in interviews and things like this. But she said, "I heard you didn't smoke, and they weren't real cigarettes." And I'm curious as to what you did smoke, and did it ever affect you in terms of what you were smoking and things like that? What was it you were actually having instead of an actual cigarette?
These are they're called herbal cigarettes, and you can buy them. I don't know why anybody would buy them. I don't know why anybody would ever smoke them. But sometimes I think people try to smoke them to get off the habit, because you can still do the same physical activities that you would do if you were smoking tobacco. But they are really very unpleasant. They smell terrible. You have to wash them out of your hair at the end of the day. But the good thing about them is they're not addictive, and you would never want to smoke another if you didn't have to. Unlike tobacco cigarettes, which I had been a smoker, so it was important not to re-habituate myself to that addiction.
Yeah, it's interesting that you don't know any different. As a viewer, you just you assume that's tobacco. That's why it was good.
And actually, strangely, as a prop, they're actually better than tobacco, because they burn more evenly. They're more reliable, and they're more visual. So they're actually a better prop than a tobacco cigarette.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's it. I imagine they're used probably quite widely now. But a question from Bethany. She says, "I'd like to know which actor on the show was your favourite screen partner to work with over the years." She said you had especially great chemistry, obviously, with David Duchovny and Mitch Pileggi, and the tension just rolled off on those scenes. But who's your favourite sparring partner, I suppose?
Well, if you put it as sparring partner,
in a certain way, it can be either any interpretation, really.
But I had a lot of pleasure working with Chris Owens, who played my son. We really enjoyed working together.
We had Chris on the show actually recently. We had Chris Owens on the show. He's a lovely guy, really nice guy.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, over the years, there's been lots of kind of individual situations, but yeah, those three, I would think. Yeah,
I think you can see it on screen, really. Bethany also asks, have you ever done any comedic roles, and do you enjoy that style of acting?
Oh yes, I'm actually very good at comedy, and people don't know that, and they hardly ever get to see me do it. Yeah. But I've certainly done some on stage. And I've done cuddly grandfathers on film, on TV. You should see something called Signed, Sealed, and Delivered, where I was a charming little grandfather. Quite different.
Was that while you were doing The Smoky Man, or was that before The X-Files?
No, that was after.
That was after.
Or
okay.
In the middle, in the gap.
Yeah.
That was quite recent. Yeah.
Okay.
But yes, I'd love to do more comedy. I enjoy doing that.
The thing is, there were moments in the show where your delivery of lines was very dry-witted anyway, and that did come out in The Smoking Man. I think the one we were talking about recently, we were talking about the season 3 finale on the show, and that's the scene where you talk about the water skiing, which is a famous line, and exactly. that was very funny.
Right. He was a very good water skier, but not as good as I was. Which could be said about so many other things. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that could have been delivered in all kinds of ways, but it did come out really well. So in terms of comedy, so yeah, I can see that. Mm-hmm. Anna asks, she said she's apologised this isn't X-Files related, but she says, what was it like to work on Stephen King's It some time ago, I assume?
Unfortunately brief. There was a whole other scene that I was supposed to do, so the part really would have been much bigger. But when it actually came to shoot, they'd already cut the scene for whatever reason. I don't know. So we only had that little moment on it. What I do have more memory of was I worked as what we call a rehearsal actor on Needful Things, which is another Stephen King, because they had a week of rehearsal, and I forget the name of the actor who couldn't be there, but anyway, I filled in for him in those rehearsals, and they were really interesting to be kind of part of the way that film developed, so that was fun to do.
When you say rehearsal actor, I mean, I might be being really dim here, but what does that kind of entail?
Well, they don't do it very often, so they blocked all the scenes from the movie, but since this actor couldn't be there, they needed someone else to be there, so that was me. And in some cases, it could be just somebody to stand in the right place so they could do the blocking. But in other situations, we actually played the scene and we explored different aspects of how the scene might develop. So, yeah, it's not that often that happens. I mean, usually they don't do that, but it was interesting.
Yeah, it does sound unique. Yeah, quite interesting. Just going back to the X-Files, Michael asks, going back to NME as well, the episode obviously you wrote, can you remember the key differences between your script for NME and the episode that actually aired? And again, I think you've talked about this before, but can you remember any specifics?
Well, it went through so many stages. I mean, in my first iteration of it, I actually taught Scully to water ski, which I think would have been really fun.
That would have been a great payoff of that moment we talked about earlier.
But too bad. That didn't survive very long through the script conferences. But
that's a shame.
Most of it was a question of style. And you know, in fairness to Chris, he has the flair of how these people talk. So I think that worked well. I wanted more clarity, and Rob Bowman and I both talked about this, who directed it, about why I threw the tape in the water at the end. What was my motivation? You know, and we argued with Chris about trying to make that more clear, but he seemed to think it was good enough. What else? I can't remember now that clearly, you know, but it, because it went through a number of, because first we worked the script with the script department and with Frank Spotnitz and the other writers, and then I wrote a script, which was more or less supposed to be it, but then Chris did a fairly significant revision of that before we actually shot it.
Yeah, and obviously it was quite some time ago now, but there's interesting insights, especially about throwing the tape in the water, because as you say, there is ambiguity there, and it does leave it open ended. Again, it's it's that whole thing of is he as bad a guy as you think? Is he a good guy? You know, all those kind of questions really. So it was interesting that was done. In the way it was done. We're about to cover the episode Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man, obviously from season 4, which was the big Smoking Man showcase as to whether or not it was true, his backstory and things like that. But do you have any particular episode or particular part of the run of the X-Files that you remember fondly in terms of your character, or is it just the whole thing, or does it all kind of blend into one?
No, there's certainly some episodes. The one I keep going back to is Talita Kumi, which is based on a Dostoevsky novel, and where I'm sending the Messiah back because he's messing up everything. He's got to, and I had those great scenes with Roy Thinnes when he's locked up, and we have it's kind of serious debates, and also in that episodes where we had the scenes with Mrs. Mulder too, I think too. So, that was a favorite episode certainly.
Is it? I did read this recently because when we covered the episode, is it true that you and Roy Thinnes were flown out to a wedding to perform that scene?
It's true that it's a little more complicated. It's true that I was flown out.
Okay.
It wasn't a wedding. It was a reaffirmation of vows, but it was that kind of celebration, and it was a secret to his wife because they had fallen in love watching that episode, or they've been great X-Files fans, and this was a great present to her, and I wasn't sure really how I was going to do it, but we discovered that Roy Thinnes actually lived in New York, which is where we were, and so we found him, and so then Roy and I got together and we rehearsed it so that we could do it on stage. And then at this event, they snuck us in at the back. Nobody knew we were there. And they were having their great party. And then at a certain point, the curtain was pulled back, and there we were in character and played the scene. So that was pretty fun.
that must have been. Were they all Can you remember the whole crowd were X-Files fans, or was it just the couple, or how was it received?
No, it was mainly the couple.
Okay.
He's quite connected guy, and even Bob Weinstein was there. So there was some quite influential people, but not specifically X-Files. No, I don't think it was specifically X-Files.
That's still an amazing thing. When I read that, I was like, that's amazing. So, I suppose my final question, really, and thanks to everyone who put questions in for William. They're great questions. Thank you for that. But I suppose my final question really is, if the show comes back and the Smoking Man rises again, which he surely will, what would you like? What kind of role would you like him to play? Would you like him to be the grand villain again? Would you like him to have a redemption? Would you like him to, go back as being part of a bigger syndicate? Or what kind of? Have you thought about any future for the Smoking Man?
To be honest, no, I haven't thought it out. As we've talked, I wondered if, maybe we should finally get to the point where it's Hitler in the bunker, and I have to kill myself because of what's going to happen to me. So that would be one possible way to go. Wow.
I think at this stage, the only way he might die is if he kills himself, because then everyone else trying to kill him isn't working.
Yeah, they can't do it. Yeah. So we could do it that way.
We'll do that. We'll go for that. A final comment from John McKellar, who says, I'll be honest, I don't have a question, but I would like to thank him, to know him how thankful I am for his performance as the Smoking Man all these years, which I think is a sentiment echoed by everyone who sent questions in and who is listening today, really.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do. I heard that often at Spooky Empire, and it's really gratifying to hear that. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure, and thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything that you right now you've got coming up that you'd like to talk about or promote or point people towards that you're doing or you're working on going forward?
No, I don't going forward. Can still remind people that my book is still available, Where There's Smoke, which is a memoir I wrote in 2011. So it doesn't deal with the reboots of X-Files, but it deals with a lot of my life leading up to and including the first 9 seasons. And that's available either at my website, williamedavis.com, if you want it dedicated, or you can buy it at Amazon, or you can even buy the audiobook, which I narrated. So
fabulous.
So, yeah.
That's a great. I really enjoyed it. It's a great book. It's very, very funny. I really enjoyed it, as well as interesting. Very funny. Really enjoyed it. Well, that's great. I imagine a lot of people have already read it, but if you haven't, guys, make sure you get on that and do read it. But once again, huge thanks to you, William, for coming on the show. And we will be back soon for a brand new episode of the Xcast. But remember, guys, as always, until next time, trust no one. The Xcast, an X-Files podcast, is produced and presented by Tony Black, alongside a dedicated group of podcasters and X-Files fans. You can find us on Twitter at the Xcast, and on Facebook if you type in the Xcast, or at our group X-Files Basement, an Xcast podcast fan group, where you can continue the discussion about all things Mulder and Scully. If you want to support the Xcast further, you can now subscribe and become a patron of the show on Patreon. On Google, just type patreon.com/the Xcast. That's Patreon. You'll see all of our tiers, subscription options and perks, which include early access to episodes, bonus content such as commentaries on X-Files episodes, access to a patron chat zone, and even appearing on one of our patron roundtable discussions. We would appreciate any support you can give the show, so just go to patreon.com/the Xcast to find out more. Our title music is provided courtesy of Will A, who you can find on Twitter at IamWillAYE.